Okay, so in this time of great conflict and turmoil in the Middle East, I figured it would be a nice change of pace for us to cover a topic that we're so familiar with, Nazis. So here's a clip. There's this twink cosplaying as a paleocon, and he's got words for us all. Too many words now that I'm looking at the length of this video. 2 minutes 15. I might just skip this and read what's up here, but let's see. Let's see if he says it quickly, okay?
I don't care that much about this conflict.
Okay, that was
Just
quick.
like I really don't care that much about Russia and Ukraine. But just like with Russia and Ukraine, this conflict has severe consequences for our adversaries. And what are we?
He means the Jews, obviously.
We are an American sovereignty movement. You understand what that means? We believe that the American people should have sovereignty over their own country. It means that we...
He means white people. Anyway, he said the important part. This is one of the things that really holds Nick Fuentes back. I don't know if he can really recover from this. His audience is full of, like, room temperature IQ 12-year-olds who are going to get over this, like, when they, I don't know, get a girlfriend in sophomore year of high school. So he needs to spell things out really simply. It's not actually good politics to go, hey guys, I'm being disingenuous and lying right now. That's not actually good politics. It's bad. It doesn't help, you know? You're not really that effective of a dissonant info warrior if you're like leaning over to the audience and being like the fourth wall and being like, hey, I don't actually care about the Palestinian people, you know? Anyway, most far-right people are siding with Israel. Why? Because Israel is currently a fascist ethno-state engaging in an ethnic cleansing. The far right loves it. You know, that's perfect. It fits. However, while fascists overwhelmingly are aligning with Israel, Nazis not so much, for reasons which I imagine will be obvious to most of you. Nazis have always actually been kind of 50-50 split on Israel. Obviously, a lot of them don't like Israel because, you know, Jews. But a lot of them see Israel as aspirational because it's a far-right ethno-state that ruthlessly oppresses different ethnic and religious groups. They see it and they go, you know, well, we don't like the Jews, but we do like all the horrible things they're doing to Palestinian people, so yeah, you know. And you get this weird kind of like dissonance, you know. Keep in mind that Nazism, as with all fascist ideologies, very often incoherent and kind of silly, a little goofy. They're goofy goobers. The very far-right people, the Nazis, a lot of them are disingenuously siding with Palestinians in order to use this conflict as a wedge to drive up hatred against Jews. Hating Israel is not only acceptable, it's actually morally obligatory. You have to be a good person. Thankfully, for our souls, Israel and Jewish people are two entirely separate things. As much as Netanyahu and the Israeli state has tried to blur the lines between the two, Israel is not Jews, and Jews are not Israel. And that can never change. Ever. No matter how hard they try. So right now, a lot of people are getting riled up, really angry at Israel, and they should be. That's good. The Nazis want this to be a sort of rising tide of anti-Semitism. Now, to an extent, this is inevitable. This is because the average human is retarded. The average human, maybe not the average, but a good number of them, will just associate Israel and Jews, and if Israel does something bad, they'll go, oh, those darn Jews, and that really is just the cognitive level they're operating on. You know, not everyone, but a lot of people. And as a consequence of that, there will be, and already has been, a rising tide of anti-Semitism following the horrific attacks from Hamas, and then the even more horrific attacks from the IDF. There have been swastikas spray painted on synagogues, bricks thrown through the windows of Jewish businesses. You know, there are some people who are fear-mongering over this and pretending that there's some, like, night of broken glass shit going on right now, and there's not. That's made up. That's fear-mongering. But there always has been a lot of hate directed at Jews in America and the world around, and there will be more. And the more hatred there is directed against Jewish people specifically, the easier it will be for Zionists to fearmonger and promote Israeli sovereignty because they can point at anti-Semitism and go, that's why we need an ethno-state, to protect us from that. And the reason that's happening is partly because of the anti-Semitism, but also partly because of the behavior of Israel. And Israel makes this worse by deliberately associating itself with the Jews. Right. The reason I'm talking about this, well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, obviously, anti-Semitism is bad. Hot take, I know. And also, just because Israel is monstrous doesn't mean we shouldn't be vigilant in keeping an eye out for anti-Semitism within our own communities. A good example of this would be, you know how lefties, especially white lefties, are really bad at calling out problematic behavior from ethnic minorities? I can just envision, and I've already seen this, so I'm not envisioning it really, but I can envision a worsening of like Arab anti-Semitism that lefties are like plain anti-Semitism. And lefties are like, well, how are you going to critique an oppressed people for critiquing their, like that shit, you know what I mean? So I'm just forewarning against this. I am preemptively putting the hands up here. Keep an eye out for all of that, you know, much in the same way that there's been this weird spike in the prominence of black anti-Semitism, you know, like the Hebrew nationalist groups who think that they're the real tribes of Israel. And that's bad. It is bad to be anti-Semitic. Again, hot take. We're probably going to see the same around the place. So, yeah. I've always thought that the left doesn't really take anti-Semitism that seriously because the left often focuses on economic critique as their, like, core mode of social engagement. And Jews economically do quite well in the United States, you know, at least. So they don't, because, you know, like if you're taking a look at racism against black people or Hispanic people, the bigotry that those groups face is very often economic. Jewish people have obviously faced economic discrimination, but here in the United States today, at least in terms of like income and educational attainment, they do quite well. So I think a lot of people are like, you know, they don't take it as seriously. Let's not make that mistake, you know. You can be as well-educated and as wealthy as you want. It won't save you from getting bricked in the head by a brown shirt, you know. So just keep that in mind. I also wanted to say that Nazis are going to use this as a wedge issue for recruitment because from an outward perception, like outwardly, it really kind of seems like the USA is completely cucked by Israel. It does. The Nazi narrative is that Jews control the US, and right now, from the outside, it really genuinely seems like Israel just gets to do it at once, despite being this microscopic country in the Middle East, and the United States of America can just, like, at most, they can just sort of play along or follow their orders or whatever. Now, this is wrong. That's not a real thing. But I wanted to explain why that perception appears to be the case. You know, why does America barely push back? Why does an incredibly powerful country of 350 million, mostly Christians, just go along with whatever shit Israel wants? Well, let's examine that. First of all, if we did everything Israel wanted, then we already would have used American cannons to level half the Middle East into a flat pane of glass that Israel could build parking lots on. To be clear, all right, first and foremost, if we actually did whatever Israel wanted, you would know. Israel wants a lot of wacky stuff, okay? So just keep that in mind. The degree of support they would like from us goes well beyond the degree of support we actually provide. That's number one. Second of all, the main thing that gives Israel this appearance of power is the fact that Americans have very strong opinions on Israel. Even though the vast majority of Americans are neither Jewish nor Arab, many Americans have a strong opinion on them, in large part because of decades and decades of American-led propaganda, which intended to pose Israel as the sole democracy in the Middle East, which, I guess, technically they are, but, you know, look what that's doing for them. You know, for all that's worth, clearly. That propaganda and the nonstop sort of disinfo campaign, the sort of manufactured consent that we've created in order to defend the existence and support of Israel has largely been to our benefit. The problem is we've kind of constructed a problem for ourselves. You know, American foreign policy has shifted over the past century. Obviously, we're not, you know, invading Latin American countries at the behest of fruit companies anymore. You know, it's even been 20 years since we invaded a Middle Eastern country. Can you believe it? properly invaded. Obviously, drone strikes don't count. If we're counting drone strikes, we're never getting out of this, all right? Our attitude towards imperialism has shifted more and more towards economic imperialism. The American appetite for conflict has waned significantly. The average American voter really does not want U.S. soldiers with their boots in the ground elsewhere. We haven't for a long time. It is not politically effective. We do not like that, okay? That is not what American citizens want right now. Israeli civilians, on the other hand, love it. Israeli political discourse and internal propaganda is heavily focused on militarism, combat, imperialism, engagement, our boys liberating people, defending themselves, blah, 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 blah. So Israel now has a very different set of interests and priorities for defending itself than America does with Israel. The problem is we have so thoroughly intertwined support for Israel with support for Jewish people, which was the sort of disingenuous, socially liberal argument for supporting Israel. You know, like, you can win over the neocons with the sort of Christian evangelicism, and you can win over people broadly with the whole one democracy in the Middle East thing. But how do you win over the socially liberal crowd with the Israeli project? Well, we're creating a safe space for Jews. It's a safe space, you know? But now that's not convenient for us because thanks to our propaganda, it appears anti-Semitic to a lot of people to challenge Israel. You see how this is a problem we've created for ourselves? Israel appears to have a lot of power, but in reality, Israel has power in the same way that, like, unborn fetuses have power, where a lot of political weight is moved around on their behalf, but they themselves have no power. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? It's like it's like veterans, you know, like veterans as an actual political bloc aren't crazy active. Like, they are, but they're only so powerful, right? But veterans, as other people have constructed them, on the behalf of other people, are this massively powerful political bloc. You know what I mean? So the reason Biden is struggling so much right now, the reason why it seems like all we can do is follow along, is because, let's be real, we have an incredibly contested election and general political environment, and there is no clean dub on the Israel-Palestine issue. There is no, like, easy win there. There's no way to sort of manipulate these circumstances into a very clear political victory. Keep in mind that Joe Biden pulled out of Afghanistan on Donald Trump's timeline and lost a ton of public support for it. You know, there's just, in the Middle East, there's just no clean and easy win. It just can't happen, you know? So right now, the terror gripping the heart of Biden and probably every politician in D.C. is that they're walking this incredibly, like, precarious tightrope where it seems like, because of the propaganda we've constructed and the way in which we've weaponized the existence of Israel and the defense of Jewish people on both sides against each other, Republicans do this to Dems, Dems do this to Republicans, now we're in a situation where, when Israel is actually really visibly doing something incredibly fucked up, American politicians have no clean direction to go. There are correct moral directions to go, but in terms of political expediency, there is no safe path. It's all a minefield. So Israel doesn't control America. The Jews don't control America. America has, in its effort to defend a project in the Middle East, constructed a political Chinese finger trap from which there seems to be no clear way to extricate ourselves. It is a construction of our own design. On their own, of their own volition, Israel has very, very little power over the United States. And to the extent that they do, by the way, Israel is borderline oppositional. The Israeli intelligence and defense communities are not like crazy hawkish American allies. Israel is not a great friend to the U.S., you know? And we toss Israel paltry sums of money for their, you know, for their defense spending, in large part to satisfy the contingent of American voters who are obsessed with protecting this project, this Israeli project. Does everyone understand what I've said here? Does everyone understand how Nazis are going to use this as a wedge issue? How Israel has no autonomous power, very little autonomous power, but we have constructed a media environment where it appears as though they have an enormous amount of power. You know, Yes, it is always worth pointing out that the loudest and most aggressive Zionists are not Jews. Most Jews vote Democrat, but rather Christian evangelicals, in large part because A, it's politically expedient for them to get to pretend that they're anti-Semitism, which they're not, and B, because evangelicals often believe that Jews have to control the Holy Land in order to bring about the rapture. I know it's distressing, but unfortunately, there are a significant number of Americans and politicians who genuinely believe that. So, cult's gonna cult. Vosh, is that media environment caused by AIPAC at the prayer breakfast thing? No. AIPAC would have absolutely no power if it weren't for both political parties hyping it up in an effort to score political points against the other. The media environment was caused by us. We've spent literal decades defending the Israeli occupation project in every possible way, and we are now reaping what we have sown. We are now sort of harvesting the seeds of our disinformation. It's about half of Israel supporters. Oh, man. Really? Well, from the Washington Post, yeah. Half of evangelicals, it's blocking the thing, of course, half of evangelicals support Israel because they believe that it's fulfilling for their end times prophecy. Half of evangelicals. Evangelicals are the most powerful religious bloc in the country, too, so you can imagine that affects their decision-making quite a bit. A lot of them won't say it openly because they know it sounds insane, but their logic is if we stuff Israel full of Jews, we get beamed into heaven, right? That's a bit of a simplification. Their logic is that if we stuff Israel full of Jews and a bunch of other things happen, all the Jews get sacrificed and the good Christians go to heaven while the rest of us languish in a hellish earth. The Jews do not go to heaven in their game plan. CNN did polling on Americans' opinions on the situation. If you really think that like the average 63-year-old from Wisconsin is sympathetic towards Israel because of the Jews, your reading on the situation is woefully undersupported. Are most American Christians evangelicals? Thankfully, no. 24% of U.S. adults describe themselves as born-again or evangelical Protestants, which is down 6 percentage points since 2007. That's pretty good. From 30% to 24% in the space of 15 years. It also really depends on how the term evangelical is defined. There's not really like a strong... Again, this is the problem with Protestants. It's that, with Catholics, their association is a lot easier to figure out. With Protestants, it's like, well, what specific church, it's a million churches.